Hello. Nice to see you here. My presentation will be about narrative design, and I think it's a crowning presentation after like 5 presentations about how to tell stories. Luckily, I hope I will have something to add, or at least add some perspective to all the great things that were said lately. I start with a brief introduction. That's me. I've worked in the industry for, I don't know, 16 years. I'm a designer and a writer, and I usually focus on interactive stories and system narratives. I think about it a lot, and that's why I'm gonna talk about it. I also teach design and story design on Politechnika Łódzka, so that's another reason to think about what I do, because I have to explain it to students. I have quite a range of experience from AAAs through AAAs, some artistic indies, to mobile free-to-plays. So I think that gave me the opportunity to look at very different instances of how games can tell stories. And I've worked in teams from 4 to over 120 people, so that's also quite a range of how organizations can approach narrative design. I got about 12 shipped titles and about 8 cancelled projects. Some of them were cancelled after a day, some after a year. So, but that was also some, some knowledge, something to learn. And what else? I had the occasion to write, to do the general game design, system design, economy balancing, and narrative design. And narrative design is my prime focus now, so that's another reason why I'm telling you all of this. But before we go further, I have a public service announcement. There's a Polish game dev survey, salary survey going on. So if you are a Polish game dev, please scan this QR code now and answer a few anonymous questions, and the results will be published in June. And the last year report can be found on my website, so if you want to see what will happen to the data we gather, we can check it. And now let's go back to the scheduled program. Why this talk? Because there was a lot of narrative talks on this conference, and some tackled characters, some tackled level design, open world design, or narrative through gameplay. Well, I have this personal need that I want more games telling good stories. That's what I need as a player, and that is what interests me as a creator. And by games telling good stories, I don't necessarily mean good movies injected into games. And to have more games telling good stories, I think, what happened? Sorry. Sorry. I think we need more people who are trained in delivering good stories in game. I think this is a totally separate craft. A craft that is needed more and more as our medium matures. And the people are narrative designers, and the craft is narrative design, so I think I will share with you some thoughts I have on the topic. You may agree with me or not, because this is some kind of, let's say, there's some kind of ideological talk. I will try to sell you an idea, but I'm not totally sure if the idea works as I think it works, but maybe it will be a good place to start a conversation. Okay. So the need. Let's take a look. You know what? Let's take a look at a story we probably all know. This is The Last of Us. And it was a game, very good game. And lately, it is also a TV series, quite a good one. And people have many ideas about the adaptation. Some like it, some don't like it. At some places, the adaptation is very close to the source material. There are places when they add something, and there are places when they deduct something. And what they deduct is usually, you know, gameplay, yeah? Walking around. And people say, oh, that's a great adaptation. This part of the TV series looked exactly like the same part of the game. For me, it's kind of an argument that this part of a game was a good movie from the start, but was it a good game? Well, it was a good game, but I mean, was this a language, a game-specific language? I'm not so sure. But I'm telling you, I'm showing you this example also because I think we need some common vocabulary, and many talks today tackled the same idea, so I will just speed through it, but I think it should be said. So, as I look at games, I see at least 3 levels of storytelling. And first level is the story, and the story is what we want to tell. So, The Last of Us is a story of a father with an adopted daughter trying to survive in a fungal, post-apocalyptic USA. And then we have narrative, and narrative is how we want to tell the story, what means of expression we use to tell the story. And a different narrative is the game, and a very different narrative of the same story is the TV series. Yeah? They use totally different means of expression, mainly because there are other media. But we can imagine another game telling the same story in a very different way. So the story is what we want to tell, and narrative is how we want to tell it. And in games, I also see this idea, I don't know how to call it, so I call it personal narrative. This is how the particular player experiences the story. And in this, I will give you the link to this presentation, so you don't have to make pictures. You may, but you don't have to. And I think about games more like, you know, when you go to a concert, there's someone, let's say, playing a cello, and they have the musical score in front of them. So I think that what we buy on the Steam or at store is the musical score, but when we play, it's our performance of the game. And everyone's performance is different. So there is this level of the personal narrative that is created as a dialogue between the author and the player. So that's the third layer of like storytelling in games. And apart from that, there are some things that you have to do to tell a story. And I think first you have the whole plotting part, like the intrigue, what happens, what event happens, why they happen, you know. Then characters, who they are, what role they play, the whole world building, so where the story takes place, all the lore, the history, the spaces the player can explore. And then there's writing, and by writing I mean, you know, the actual words spoken or written who are written by writers. And the things that we have to do to tell a story can be this responsibility can be shared in a different way. In small teams, this could be one person doing it all. In bigger teams, they probably will be specialized writers, open world designers, and so this is things to do and not roles in the in the company. And when I look or write or research the topic of game design and narrative in games, I often stumble on this approach that I found in a game called, a book called Video Game Storytelling. And the author said that during the long log of game's dev cycle, it's frighteningly easy for game design plus narrative to become game design versus narrative. So this is the approach that we have narrative and we have game design, and it is good if they work together, but probably they will clash at some point. But personally, I'm very not satisfied with this approach. I see this like game design is narrative, because if there is a story that the game wants to tell, it may be the holistic approach that was talked about in the previous lecture. But if we have a story that we want to tell with our game, everything we do in the game and every part of our design plays a role in telling the story, because it builds our narrative. Our game is how we tell our story. And yet, in almost every lecture I heard here, there was this echo, or it was quite explicit in some cases, of this divide between, gameplay and narrative, gameplay and story. So the divide is real, and why it's real? My hypothesis is, because in books, action scenes are very easy. We read the letters, and our brain does all the, rendering, physics. We can imagine everything very easily. It's cheap. In movies, action is pretty easy. Models, animation, physics, engine are already there. I can jump, yeah. No, I hate this animation in me, yeah. You see everything in 7. The physics engine is working. It's not a big deal. We can, when having some, preparing for a scene, we can decide, okay, so don't talk with him, push him. Yeah? In movies, it's very easy. But in games, oh my God, yeah, action is very complicated. You have to define everything from scratch. I can imagine that I, as a writer, go to my producer and say, I don't want them to talk. I want one of them to push the other. And okay, so should we animate it from hand, do some mock-up? Maybe we need a system for pushing, yeah? And where this takes place, can the pushed person go into a wall? And you can see where it leads. So in games, very different people work, like action scenes are very complicated. They need a lot of technology, knowledge, and specialized people who work on them. And they are, the barrier between action and words is very hard. And I think that's the beginning of the divide. And then comes the Hollywood and movies. And the more we chase for visual fidelity in games, the more we want games to look like real world, the more we reach for the knowledge, like from Hollywood, from movies, from TV series, because it's already there. It looks like we want our games to look, and a lot of those tools are very, they're useful. So apart from the divide that exists in technology and in the organizational structure, I think we use tools as narrative designers or writers. We use tools coming from cinema that are not interactive, and that just widen the divide between action and words or cutscenes. Yeah. So there are two views. One is that narrative are pieces of writing or pieces of movies that we inject into gameplay. And I'm not a fan of that approach. I'm a fan of approach that says that writing and gameplay are both means of delivering the narrative. Because gameplay is how we tell our story, how we play our games, and UI and audio and stuff like this, they are all elements of the narrative when we define narrative as how we tell the story. And that's the premise of my talk. So I think every project needs a narrative designer. And this is a role, not, it doesn't have to be, a different job. This may be just a hat that I'm wearing on some of the days on my work. The role is often combined with some other roles. I don't know, writers or level designers. But I think that the role of narrative designer is to design and understand how we are telling the story. I say design and understand because parts of it I have to design, but there always will be some organizational or technological constraints that I have to understand and comply with. And I have to design as a narrative designer the story delivery system. So I have to design how exactly are we going to tell the story in this game. And I will talk about it later. And I'm responsible for the design of the emotional part of players' engagement because emotions are driving our story usually. And probably I should design the way to explore the chosen themes and moods of the story. We should have those, yeah? We should know what our story is about, what problems we tackle, and someone should be responsible for designing how we want to be sure that we really deliver those themes or the mood. And probably my job would be cooperating with everyone. Writing, UX, level design, system design, art, everyone. Okay, oh, sorry. It's late. So, how can we tell a story? We can have cinematic cutscenes. We can have dialogues that can be interactive or not. We can have item descriptions, generally on-screen text. The whole UI is a big part of telling the story. We have characters who can look, who have a look and a way of expression, their animations, and it's also a part of how we are telling the story. You have all the environmental design, audio, level design, difficulty curve. Look at Souls-likes. Yeah, this is a way of telling the story. This is how the story in Elden Ring or Bloodborne is told, mainly by difficulty curve. We have system rhetorics, like in, I don't know, this War of Mine or Dwarf Fortress. And I know that you know all of that, but I'm listing it because as a narrative designer, I have to be aware of every part of the process and think about how to use every part of the process to tell our story. So I can design story delivery system. This is, I don't know if it is, a thing, but I think it should be a thing. So this is how we want and how we can tell the story in our particular game. So as a narrative designer, I have to think, for example, do we have text? How much text do we have? Do we have audio? Do we need audio? How the animation budget looks like? I don't know. Dialogues, how long they are, what tone they are. Do we have options? Do we have some, I don't know, timed choices? And plot missions, are they branching or not? Are they discrete, like mission 1, mission 2? Or is the story continuous, like systematically just going forward? Everything of those should be, I think, conscious choices that we make to comply with our constraints and to find the best way to deliver the story we want to tell. Is the UI heavy or light? Is it diegetic or not? You know, in Dead Space, the UI was diegetic. It was in-game. It was on the character suit, mining suit, and the display of hit points or life points were displayed on the suit. And it made sense in the context of the story because it was a mining suit and other miners should see if some of their colleagues is hurt. Yeah? So, and sometimes UI is just a UI or on-screen text. Other diegetic, so either are the on-screen text told by the characters in the game world or not? Is it strictly instructional? Maybe we want to break the fourth wall. These all are stylistic choices. Yeah? If I'm writing a book, I'm thinking, okay, do I want it to be a comedy, a detective drama? I have to, I don't know, focus on my language and stuff like this. When I'm doing a movie, I'm thinking of the color palette, of the montage. And when I'm making a game, I have to think about all of those things and make some stylistic choices. Yeah? So levels, how we do environmental storytelling, what is the level of freedom, how much exploration there is, and stuff like this. Or systems, what story do the system tells, what emotions do they want to invoke, is it systematic simulation or direct experience? Every choice is good, but they should be conscious, in my opinion. And let's take a case study. This is Unpacking. It's a game that's almost all told by environmental storytelling and level design. What we would do with the game, in the game, we unpack things when the main characters, whom we don't see at all, move from a flat to a flat, and we find a place for every item, and we learn about the protagonist. And this is a very emotional story, at least it was emotional for me as a player, about a woman's life, and it's told without a word. Everything I do, I just arrange her items, and I learn who she is, what she likes, whom she loves, about her mistakes, and how she changed, and everything is just by placing items. And it is very intimate because, you know, I unpack her underwear and her socks. And it's a bit intruding into her life, but at the same time, I learn a lot. I know that she was an athlete and then had probably an accident because her training gear is gone and now there's a walking cane. Yeah, I never see her, but I learn about her. Or she moves into a flat and her achievement, like diploma, for her sport achievement, the only place she can put it is in the bathroom above the toilet, so she doesn't want to put it here. It's like the UI says that I can put it here, and I have to hide the diploma under the bed. And I learn a lot about her and the place in life she is, and not a word is spoken. Or let's take a look at Papers, Please. This is, I think, UX storytelling at its best. This is first-person border guard simulator. All I think I need to do is to look at the papers and decide whether I put a red or green stamp and whether I allow someone to enter my country or not. But as a player, I have to learn all the totally absurd and daily changing rules that I have to follow. A person from that country needs a visa, and from that country needs a vaccine, but day later it changes, and I feel the pressure and the tension because if I make too many mistakes, I will be sent to a gulag. That was my default ending, by the way. And all the dilemmas are mine, yeah? And everything here that the UI doesn't help at all, it's very simple. I just can randomly stamp red or green, but at the same time, if I want to truly do my job, I have to read a lot and remember a lot. So that's the experience is the game, and is the language how we tell this particular story. Or Before Your Eyes. This is a storytelling rooted in the control scheme of the game, because this is a game about memories, and you are the controller. That is, you look at a memory, and when you blink, the camera registers when you blink, the memory is gone. So you try not to blink, and it all becomes deeply immersive and very personal experience, because blinking is very physical, and it is a very emotional game. And when the emotions come to, like, when the emotions are high, you don't really control your blinking, and the game is ready for it. So it's a very sad game, very sad story with death and loss and stuff like this. But it's a fascinating thing because it is told in a very unique way. The story couldn't be told in that way without, if it wasn't a game. Yeah? And Disco Elysium, I'm a fan. It's a game that understands the genre. It's a detective noir, and inner monologue is the main gameplay of the game. You just have voices in your head and they react to you. And the game understands the player psychology. For example, as Paweł Sasko said, if I have a skill, I usually want to use it. So if a dialogue option is unlocked by a skill, I want to use it. But in the game, skill-based options are not always the best. For example, if I am very strong and I come to a door, my physical ability whispers to me, yeah, don't knock, just, kick the door in. This is what police do. This is what real men should do. Yeah, and I feel satisfied because I can feel that I invested in this skill, but at the same time, it's not always the best choice. It may be an interesting one, because the game understands the tone. It's a tragicomedy, so failure may lead to funnier or more engaging results than successes sometimes, so you don't have this, if I failed, I reload my previous save. No, sometimes what happens is so funny and engaging that I just enjoy the failure. And the game also understands that games are works of culture, and they are allowed to tackle some big themes. So it's unblushingly and very controversially political, and that's one of the reasons why I love the game. And let's take a look at Uncharted. It is a very good game, very good series, but with a very visible divide between story and gameplay. Yeah? So the cinematic part tells a story, of this lovable Indiana Jones-like, and the gameplay, at least when I play it, tells a story about a mass murderer that shoots people in the head repeatedly. And you can say that this is how games communicate. Yeah? When I'm watching a movie, there's a music playing, although there's no musician on the screen, and I accept it. Because that's how movies build drama, for example. So I can say that shooting people in the head is how games build drama, and I should ignore it, because shooting people in the head on the cutscene is something different than shooting people in the head in the gameplay. But I'm not a fan of this approach. Yeah, I'm not a fan, personally. This is an artistic choice. And so, ludonarrative dissonance is defined as the dissonance, as the conflict between, video games narrative, told through the story, and narrative told through the gameplay. And I know this is very tiny changes, but I prefer to think about it that this is a tonal mismatch within the narrative, where the writing tells a different story than the gameplay. I prefer to think about it like this, that we have this one narrative, this one challenge of deciding how we want to tell the story, and then in writing we tell the story in one way, and in gameplay we tell the story in a totally different way. And I think this is just, you know, it's not a choice that I like. I'm not saying it is bad design, because it's not that, but I don't like this mismatch. Yeah? And so now I need a bit of theory, and some of those things would be very obvious, but I just have to, I need it for the later part. So there's a lot of literature about story structures, and we of course start with Aristotle, who said that every story starts at the beginning, ends at the ending, and there's a middle between that, and the beginning is the part that before beginning nothing interesting happens, and the end is the part that after the end nothing interesting happens. Nothing interesting in this place with these characters and like this plot, this intrigue. And middle are things that are needed to take us from the beginning to the end. So not everything, just the things that are needed to you know, walk us down the path from the beginning to the end. And the end should be surprising, but unavoidable. And that's, according to Aristotle, is the good ending. And because we as people like to be surprised, usually we have something unexpected here and something unexpected here. And it's, you know, it's very like basic stuff, yeah? And so we can look at every story like a five-act structure with exposition. When we show the setting characters, initiate the main conflict, then we have this rising action that the conflict escalates, we have first victories and setbacks, then is the climax, the turning point, midpoint, our central decision, or we learn something that's very important, like who the bad guy is, who's the killer, am I a good guy? Then we have falling action. It's a bit misleading because usually there's a lot of fighting in this part of the movie, but we know almost everything about the story now. We just witness the consequences of our main decision. There are some complications, maybe final suspense and resolution. Tying up the loose ends and catastrophe or victory, depending which game we play. Most games, victory, let's say Red Dead Redemption, GTA, usually catastrophe. And so there's this basic building block of every story, every scene, and every piece of gameplay that is, so there is a crisis, we struggle, and there's a resolution. Yeah, I'm a Mario, I'm running, oh, there's a hole, this is my crisis, I struggle what to do, I press the button and I jump, and either the resolution is good, I press the button in a good way, or the resolution is tragic and I fall into the hole and I learn something. Yeah? And this works of every layer of the story, you know, act, quest, scene, challenge, everyone has the same basic shape. Crisis, struggle, and resolution. And if we want the story to be, you know, full of cliffhangers, usually we do something like this, that resolution is another crisis. Okay, the crisis is I'm locked in a room, the struggle is to find the key, the resolution is I open the door, and the crisis is there's a boss there. Yeah? And the struggle is I'm fighting with the boss, and the resolution is I'm killed or I kill the boss. And so if we have fast-paced games, there's usually this chain of crisis, struggle, resolution, that is crisis, struggle, resolution, that is crisis, and if we want something slower, we set it apart. And we can look at the story as a journey. I'm not talking hero's journey, because I have opinions. But every story can be looked at as a journey from ignorance to knowledge. We have some inciting incident, we experiment, but without really knowing what to do. In the midpoint, we usually find the answer, or we think we find the answer. Then we witness or live through the consequences, and there's the resolution. And you know, it could be a boss fight. Yeah, I see the boss, I hastily change my weapon, and then I see that it was a bad decision, and I die, and I start again with different gear. But it also can be a romance or something like this. And now let's look at some very cherry-picked parts of the practice, because usually when I talk about it with my students, I have like hour and a half. So it will be really just cherry-picked ideas. First, how to make your story consistent. It's a quick and dirty trick. I list all the verbs stemming from the gameplay, all the verbs stemming from the writing. So if in writing I want to romance, but in the gameplay I want to brutally kill, there's a, you know, I compare the list, and then I try to trim the excess and adjust what I can, and then work on the common part and anchor all the basic narrative bits in the common pool, and all the basic gameplay bits in the common pool, and usually it makes a consistent game. Then a midpoint in games is usually the decision point for the player, because we want the player to have agency. Yeah? So the midpoint, when the decision is made or an information is gathered, it's usually not that we decide that the hero does it. It is usually the player who has to make the decision for themselves or find the information for themselves. And very often it's made in a very systematic way: combat, exploration, character advancement. And we need, as writers and as narrative designers, to accommodate for it. Yeah? Because this is sometimes the crucial part of our story. And in deciding that how we are telling the story, we have to accommodate for it that probably it's the player telling this part of the story and not exactly us. And this might branch our story. Yeah? So this can be quite an expensive thing. So let's look on branching, aka the non-linear story. First, our personal narrative is usually linear, but the story behind the narrative maybe not. Yeah, we have made some real branches. And the shapes the graphs I will show you, they work on every level, like the main plot, quest, dialogue, level. They are useful for all the levels of the story. And usually branching is expected, but it's a stylistic choice. It's not that value in itself. It's not like branching games are better. I don't think they are, but they are different, and this is a choice that we should make, consciously. So first is branching tree. Yeah, this is The Witcher first. This is how it looks. So we have a beginning, different plot points. They are gathered in the middle that we can branch and reach one of three endings. But we can have multiple middles. Yeah? So the end is only one. It's usually cheaper, but we have different ways of reaching the ending, and this could be systematic, like in Diablo. Every middle is a different build, but they all tell a story of reaching the same ending. Yeah? The snake is a very popular one. There's Knights of the Old Republic or most of BioWare games. So we have a branching, and then we clasp it, a branching, a choke point, branching, choke point, and a choice at the end. Or we have a golden path. There is only one path from the beginning to the end, but we have some dead ends. And they can be written, like in Choose Your Own Adventure games, or they can be systematic. For example, in God of War, I die. Yeah? And this is, you died and restart from a checkpoint. And these are the dead ends that I have to avoid or experience before I reach the ending. And we can also have similar things with something that some people call storylets. And in the previous graphs, there is a predefined path, what scene or what dialogue lines lead to another. And here, it looks like this, that we have this base of variables, knowledge base or world state that gathers, that changes after a scene, and then every scene, like a plot point or our middle point, has their conditions that have to be met, and depending on what game we are making, the algorithm either picks the best or activates all scenes where the conditions are met and the player chooses. The idea is that the progression is not predefined, but it's ruled by variables that change. And then this is systemic narrative where we have a scene, make a decision in the scene, and the scene is fed to many interlacing systems, and the systems change the world state. And in the new world state, we can make a decision, the decision is fed to the systems, the world changes. This is Dwarf Fortress, for example. Yeah? And what is, I was talking about the midpoint, so let's just have a look at decision spaces. When we make a decisions, we have to satisfy three groups. The decision must make sense for the story, so the designer is satisfied. It must make sense for the characters, and it must make sense for the player. This is what also was was said in the previous talks, that, for example, a player always takes a mission, whether it makes sense for the character or not, because the player wants to play the game. So if we can provide the context that it also makes sense for the character, I think the game is better. And decisions are a great way of characterization, because a well-designed option shows, the inner world of the character. When I see options in the dialogue, the options are limited by what the character would never do. This is what Paweł Sasko was telling about how he was fed up with the feedback, Geralt will never do it. Yeah? But the options that we see shows what the character is ready to do. So in Disco Elysium, if one of my voices is telling me, kick the door, I know this is something that my character could do. And this this tells me something about the character. But the option I choose shows what the character is. Yeah? Because character is action. So this is where I can express myself and characterize my character by making a choice. And the last thing is system rhetorics. Because, fun fact, all systems are rhetoric devices. And what I mean by it, we don't simulate as designers the world as it is, but our understanding of the world. If I design an economic system, it usually is a reflection of how I see economics. Yeah? It was this very discussed part of the design of the RIM world that women could be bisexual, but men could be only straight or homosexual. Yeah? That is a system that reflects how the creator sees the world. Yeah? So every system makes a statement, and this is usually a very powerful statement because it doesn't look like a statement. It looks like this is just how the world works. So it's worth checking what the statement is, because it may work against the moral of our story, or it may support the moral of our story. Yeah, and I will end with what I think are good practices as game design, narrative design is concerned. First, there should be someone responsible for the overall narrative. This could be the game directors, but this could be a narrative designer or narrative design department. And one of their tasks is to design the story delivery system. I think that we should consciously decide on every mechanism that tells the story to create a consistent how we tell the story. And the responsibility may be shared, of course, or combined with other tasks. And the narrative designer should understand the constraints, technical, business, and so on. But at the same time, other specialties should really understand the need for consistent narrative. And that's all. One of the QR codes is for downloading the presentation, and here is the community's salary survey again. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you a lot for the talk. I think it was really amazing, and I agree with most of the points you made. I had a very specific experience when I was playing Papers, Please, and I wanted to see what you can say maybe about it, which is when I played it and when I noticed the space was too limited in the game, I started to actually build at my desk like prints outs of the different documents, and I noticed, and I felt it was actually by design, that the game was kind of seeping out and the narrative was actually extending to my workstation.
Yes,
and I found that fascinating.
I think that was brilliant, and I like the game because all the progress, character progress, happens in my mind. I have to actually learn something. It's useless outside the game, but I have to learn something, and this is the only way to progress the game. And it's very immersive, and at the same point, it really drives the reflection of the game, like the point the game is making. So
it feels like almost something that I, as a narrative designer, can also include in my design. I can actually start.
The experience was that you are drowning in papers, like part of the bureaucracy, and it just happened while playing because it was needed to finish the game. Yes. That I also noticed that.
And I have one more question. Nobody chases me away. Okay. So back to this idea of the narrative being inside of the gameplay, right, and inside of the story, and that is, or inside of dialogues and other types of storytelling, and it can be separated. I'm very much online with that. I wanted to just challenge it in some way, because when you can see. When you look at it holistically and say you have this one giant narrative, I think you could still think that the gameplay and maybe the dialogues have like different parts of that narrative, right? So they don't really tell the same story, but only when you put them together, they tell one story, right? So I think there might even be...
But you know, when I think about movies, I can use montage to, or the camera movement to play on some themes, and words and actors to play on other themes and maybe clash them, but nobody telling about movies tells about movies like, you know, this is all montage versus actors.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is what irritates me when talking about games, that this is, you know, this is writing versus gameplay. No, these are just different channels to tell the story. This is how, at least how I see it.
No, I agree 100%. I think there just can be like creative energy from also a certain light of dissonance, right? Like you have a movie where you have a serial killer that then has a romance subplot. You can have a game that is about killing where you also have more gentle dialogues, but it should be purposeful, right? And it should actually come together as one story.
At least, I think, as long as there is someone who holds the vision and is aware that every part of the game is part of the narrative, meaning how we tell the story, I think it's okay. Yeah, but if something happens just because it's always done in such a way, I think we are losing something. We are losing control about over part of our message.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And I think we have to end now. I will be there if you want to talk. Okay. One last question.
Yeah, you said something about the decisions made by the narrative and the gameplay when they clash. It's often not about design. when you have those clashes? How about when you have like an example by Brute that has a really strong arms and do fight a lot in the gameplay, but then you encounter a room where you have closed doors and the character goes like, oh, I cannot pick this. Because you should be able to just struggle through those things.
Yeah.
Another example, sorry, I'm gonna just push through, was the Witcher 1 game, when you could not jump through the fences. And those fences did limit the boundaries, but could be done in other ways than just not allowing Geralt to jump.
You know, sometimes it's a technical thing. It was in Witcher 1, but sometimes I think it's just well. I don't like strong characters not be able to open doors in cutscenes. I don't like it. I would try to do it differently, like make the doors stronger or something like this. Keep the movie part and the gameplay part consistent. And I think it can be done, but this is my opinion.
Okay. So I was more pointing to the being the bad design having the possibility to have a closed door because you could limit the player in another way, and having those things like closed door, something that is seen that you could jump over it.
Okay.
Why can we not just have a bigger fence and say it like, yeah, don't do it because you're not able to climb it or have like
exactly.
walls with spikes.
I think, as you say, that many of those unfortunate moments can be solved by careful planning and just being aware that this is a problem or this could be a problem. And we really have to finish now because the next talk starts. So
Thank you.
Thank you once more and see you.